Hey, welcome back to Real World Deer Hunter. Let's talk about rifles and specifically ballistics and ballistic coefficients. Okay? Let's title this one, Why Ballistic Coefficient Doesn't Mean Squat to You. That's right, we hear a lot about sectional density and ballistic coefficient and how having a high ballistic coefficient is so important. Well, the fact is, in a majority of modern centerfire rifles, for a whitetail deer hunter, at least 90% of them means nothing. And I really mean nothing. Okay? You always hear that, well, a higher ballistic coefficient is going to give you flatter trajectory. You know, you're going to retain more energy at long ranges. It's going to have less wind drift. Okay? And while that is true at extreme ranges, notice I said extreme ranges, the average whitetail shot at 100 yards or so, maybe a lot less in a lot of areas. So, you could just take my word for it, or we could take a look at a trajectory chart that I made from two different ammos from the same company. Okay? And this also shows you why necessarily spending money on more expensive ammunition is not needed. Okay? We're going to take a look, and I've got my paper, and I'm going to post it up so you'll be able to see it too. We're going to compare Hornady 139 grain 7mm Remington Magnum American Whitetail, okay? Cheap ammo, versus their 162 grain Precision Hunter. Okay? And it's in a 7mm Remington Magnum, which is pretty decently flat shooting rifle. Not that much flatter than anything else. Okay? So, main thing we have to know is ballistic coefficient, right? That's so important. Well, ballistic coefficient of the American Whitetail 139 grain, since it's very short for its caliber, okay, is 0.392, which is not a high ballistic coefficient at all. The Precision Hunter has a really high ballistic coefficient, right? It's shooting a 162 grain ELDX bullet. Its ballistic coefficient is 0.631. Okay, should be vastly superior in trajectory and all that. Well, what I'm telling you is out to 400 yards, it means about squat. Get it? Nothing. So if you sight in approximately 1.3 to 1.4 inches high, I mean, we're talking about a 10th inch difference at 100 yards. At 200 yards, you're dead on. Fantastic. At 300 yards, you're 5.9 inches low. 5.9 inches low with the 139 grain. With the 162, with that great big ballistic coefficient, 6.3 inches low. That's 4/10 of an inch. Somewhere around 3/8, I'm guessing. Not big difference trajectory-wise. Now, at 400 yards, the 139 grain American Whitetail, minus 17.3 inches. You can see it's really falling off there. Well, guess what? That 162 grain ELDX, minus 17.3 inches. Identical. So why spend the extra money? And remember, I went extremes on my comparison. I went from a 139 grain bullet with the worst ballistic coefficient I could find to the 162 grain ELDX, which is designed as a long-range bullet, long and thin for the caliber versus short and fat for the caliber. Okay, if you took that same American whitetail and went to the 154 grain interlock loading for it, you'll have a higher ballistic coefficient. You'll carry a little more oomph downrange, which for a whitetail, you're still at like 2,000 versus 1,600 foot-pounds, so they're dead anyhow. So where does all this ballistic coefficient stuff, where is it really important? Well, 500 yards makes a huge difference. 600 yards, a really big difference. But who's really shooting past 400 yards with any regularity? Now, if you're way out west and going on an antelope hunt, yeah, you might want a better ballistic coefficient, especially out in the prairie where you can have a lot of wind and, you know, you can cut your wind drift in half. But we're talking about whitetails, whitetail deer. And unless you're hunting them out on the prairie or shooting 500 yards across a bean field or something like that, there's no need. So, in my opinion, ballistic coefficient doesn't mean anything when I'm buying ammunition. Hey, for Real World Deer Hunter, I'm Steve.